I woke up that Tuesday morning to find my work truck missing from my own driveway, and the rage that flooded through me was unlike anything I had felt in my 32 years of life. My name is Isaac Henderson, and I am a licensed electrician who has been working in the Phoenix, Arizona area for the past 8 years. I had purchased my modest 3-bedroom house in the Sunset Ridge community about 2 years ago, thinking it would be a peaceful place to build my life. The neighborhood was clean, the streets were well maintained, and the houses all had that cookie-cutter charm that comes with planned developments in Arizona. What I did not account for was the tyrannical reign of the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association, specifically their president, a woman named Patricia Morrison. Patricia was everything you would expect from a stereotypical HOA president. She was in her late 40s, always wore visors even when it was not particularly sunny, and had that distinctive haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," from a mile away. Her personality matched her appearance perfectly. She seemed to derive genuine pleasure from citing violations and making life difficult for anyone who dared to deviate even slightly from her interpretation of the community rules. But let me back up and explain how I got to this point, standing in my empty driveway at 6:30 in the morning, staring at the oil stain where my Ford F-250 work truck should have been parked. I had parked my truck in my driveway the night before, just like I did every single night after work. It was a white 2019 Ford F-250 with my company logo on the side, Henderson Electric Services, in bold blue letters. The truck bed contained my tools, equipment, and supplies worth approximately $15,000. I kept everything organized in a custom toolbox system, and I had expensive diagnostic equipment that I had spent years accumulating. When I bought the house, I read through the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions like any reasonable person would. There was a section about vehicles, stating that commercial vehicles over a certain weight could not be parked on the street overnight. My truck was parked in my driveway, on my property, so I never thought twice about it. The covenants did mention something vague about maintaining curb appeal, but nothing specifically prohibited work trucks in driveways. About 3 months ago, Patricia had started her campaign against me. It began with a letter in my mailbox, typed on official HOA letterhead, informing me that my work truck was unsightly and diminished the aesthetic value of the community. The letter requested that I park my vehicle elsewhere or face potential fines. I ignored the first letter. It was not a violation notice, just a request, and I had every legal right to park on my own property. A week later, another letter arrived, this time with a more threatening tone. It stated that the HOA board had determined my truck violated the community standards, and that I needed to comply within 14 days or face a fine of $50 per day. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting, which was held on a Thursday evening at the community center. About 20 residents were scattered around the room, most of them older retirees who seemed to have nothing better to do than obsess over their neighbor's business. Patricia sat at the front table with 2 other board members, a thin man named Gerald who barely spoke, and a woman named Brenda who nodded at everything Patricia said. When the floor opened for resident comments, I raised my hand and stood up. "Hi, I am Isaac Henderson from 4782 Desert Willow Drive. I received letters about my work truck, and I want to clarify that I am not violating any rules. My truck is parked on my private property, not on the street. The covenants do not prohibit work vehicles in driveways." Patricia looked at me with thinly veiled contempt. "Mr. Henderson, the board has determined that commercial vehicles are detrimental to property values. We have the authority to enforce community standards." "Can you show me specifically where in the covenants it says I cannot park my work truck in my own driveway?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and professional. She shuffled through some papers with obvious irritation. "The covenants state that the HOA has the right to maintain aesthetic standards and prevent activities that harm property values. Your truck is commercial in nature and creates an eyesore." "It is a regular pickup truck with a company logo," I countered. "Lots of residents have pickup trucks. Mine just happens to have my business name on it. I use it to make a living. I am not running a business from my home. I am simply parking my vehicle in my driveway." The other residents were watching this exchange with interest. A few looked sympathetic to my position, but most seemed content to let Patricia run the show. "The board's decision is final," Patricia said tersely. "You have 14 days to comply or you will be fined. Next item on the agenda." I sat down, frustrated but not defeated. I decided to consult with a lawyer friend of mine, Marcus, who did not specialize in HOA law but knew enough to point me in the right direction. He reviewed my covenants and confirmed that the language was vague and that I had a strong case if they tried to fine me. He advised me to document everything and respond to any violation notices in writing. The 14 days passed, and I continued parking my truck in my driveway. Sure enough, I received a violation notice informing me that I was being fined $50 per day until I complied. The notice was dated to start from that day forward. I sent a certified letter to the HOA board stating that I disputed the fine, that I was not in violation of any specific covenant, and that I would not be paying. I cited the exact sections of the covenants that I was complying with, and requested that they provide specific language prohibiting my truck. Patricia responded with another letter stating that my appeal was denied and that the fines would continue to accumulate. She also mentioned that the HOA had the right to take necessary action to enforce compliance. This back and forth continued for about 2 months. The fines were supposedly accumulating into the thousands of dollars, but I had no intention of paying something that was not legally enforceable. I went about my business, working my electrical jobs during the day and parking my truck in my driveway at night. Then came that Tuesday morning in late March. I walked outside at 6:30, coffee mug in hand, ready to head to a job site in Scottsdale, and my truck was gone. At first, I thought maybe I was still half asleep and had parked on the street for some reason. I walked to the curb and looked both directions. Nothing. My truck was nowhere to be seen. My heart started pounding. I pulled out my phone and called my business partner, Jake, thinking maybe he had picked it up early for some reason, though that made no sense. He answered groggily. "Jake, did you take my truck this morning?" "What? No, man. Why would I take your truck? It is not even 7 yet." "It is gone from my driveway. Someone took it." "Dude, you need to call the cops right now. That is grand theft auto." He was right. I hung up and immediately dialed 911. I reported my vehicle stolen from my private property. The dispatcher took my information and said an officer would be there within 30 minutes. While I waited, I walked around my property looking for any clues. That is when I noticed something I had missed in my initial panic. There were tire tracks in the gravel near the edge of my driveway, the kind that a tow truck would make. My stomach sank as realization hit me. The HOA had towed my truck. I stormed back inside and pulled up the HOA's phone number. It was not even 7 in the morning yet, so I got voicemail. I left a message that probably sounded unhinged, demanding to know if they had towed my truck and threatening legal action. Officer Ramirez arrived about 20 minutes later. He was a younger guy, maybe in his late 20s, and he took the situation seriously. I explained everything. The HOA dispute, the letters, the fines, and waking up to find my truck gone. "You have any proof they towed it?" he asked, taking notes. "Just the tire tracks and the timing. I have been in a dispute with the HOA president for months about this truck." "Let me make some calls," he said. He spent about 10 minutes on his radio and phone, checking with towing companies in the area. Finally, he came back to me with information. "Your truck was towed to Desert Star Towing on Indian School Road. The tow was authorized by your HOA." "They stole my truck from my own property," I said, anger rising in my voice. "That is theft." Officer Ramirez nodded slowly. "It might be. Let me explain something. When an HOA tows a vehicle without proper authority, it can constitute theft, especially if they took it from private property rather than a common area. Do you want to press charges? Absolutely I do. Okay, here is what we are going to do. First, you need to get your truck back from the tow yard. You should not have to pay the towing or storage fees since the tow was unauthorized. If they give you trouble, call me." He handed me his card. "Second, I am going to write up a report for theft of property. The detective division will investigate, and the county attorney will decide whether to file charges." "What are my chances here?" I asked. "Honestly, pretty good. Arizona law is clear that you cannot just take someone's vehicle from their private property without legal authority. The HOA does not have that authority. Even if they claimed some lien rights, they would have to go through proper legal channels. They cannot just unilaterally decide to tow your truck." I felt a mix of vindication and continued anger. "What about my tools and equipment?" "The truck bed is full of expensive equipment. Check everything when you get there. If anything is missing, that is additional theft charges." After Officer Ramirez left, I called an Uber to take me to the tow yard. During the ride, I tried calling the HOA number again. This time, someone answered. It was Brenda, one of the board members. "Sunset Ridge HOA, this is Brenda. This is Isaac Henderson. Your association had my truck towed from my private driveway this morning. I want to know on whose authority that happened, and I want it returned immediately." There was a pause. "Mr. Henderson, you have been in violation of community standards for months and have accumulated thousands of dollars in fines. The board authorized the removal of the vehicle as enforcement action. You do not have the legal authority to steal my truck from my property. I have already filed a police report for theft. I suggest you get a lawyer because you are all going to need one." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking with adrenaline. The tow yard was exactly what you would expect. A chain-link fence surrounding rows of vehicles, a small office that looked like it had not been updated since 1985, and a grumpy attendant who looked like he had heard every sob story imaginable. "I am here to get my truck." It was towed without authorization this morning. He did not even look up. Towing fee is $275 plus $50 per day storage. I am not paying anything. The tow was illegal. I have a police report for theft. I placed Officer Ramirez's card on the counter. "You can call this officer if you have questions." That got his attention. He looked at the card, then at me, then picked up his phone and made a call. After a brief conversation, he hung up and sighed. "Fine. Fill out this release form. Your truck is in the back lot." It took another 20 minutes to process the paperwork, but eventually I was reunited with my truck. I spent 15 minutes carefully checking every tool, every piece of equipment, every wire and component. Everything appeared to be there. The truck itself was undamaged. I took photos of everything with my phone, documenting the condition and contents. As I drove home, I called Marcus, my lawyer friend. I explained the entire situation in detail. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he let out a low whistle. Isaac, they really screwed up. Like, monumentally screwed up. You have them dead to rights on multiple counts. What are my options? Criminally, the police are already handling that. But civilly, you can sue them for conversion, which is the civil equivalent of theft. You can also sue for violation of your property rights, and possibly for the tort of outrage depending on how extreme their conduct was. Arizona has a statute that allows for treble damages in theft cases. Treble damages. What does that mean? It means triple. If you can prove the value of what they took and the damages you suffered, the court can award you 3 times that amount as punishment. It is designed to deter theft. How much are we talking about? Marcus paused. How much is your truck worth? About $30,000. The tools and equipment are another $15,000. Plus I lost a day of work today, which is probably $500, and I have had to deal with months of stress from these people. Okay, so conservatively, we are looking at actual damages of maybe $46,000 or so when you factor in lost wages, emotional distress, and the value of your time. Triple that is over $130,000. And that is before attorney fees, which they would also have to pay if you win. My head was spinning. Are you serious? Completely. Look, I do not handle this kind of litigation myself, but I know someone who does. Her name is Angela Martinez, and she is a shark when it comes to HOA abuse cases. Let me give her a call and see if she will take your case. Marcus, I cannot thank you enough. Hey, that is what friends are for. These HOA tyrants need to be put in their place. I will call you back within an hour. True to his word, Marcus called me back 53 minutes later. Angela wants to meet with you. She says based on what I told her, you have an excellent case. Can you do tomorrow at 10 in the morning? Absolutely. He gave me the address of her office in downtown Phoenix. I spent the rest of that day working on a job I had scheduled, though my mind was only half on the electrical panel I was installing. The homeowner noticed I seemed distracted and asked if everything was okay. I gave him a brief version of the story, and he was outraged on my behalf. Sue them into oblivion, he said. I hate HOAs. They are just busybodies with too much time and a little bit of power. That evening, I drafted a detailed timeline of everything that had happened with the HOA, from the first letter to that morning's theft. I printed out every letter, every email, every piece of correspondence. I gathered my purchase documents for the truck, receipts for my tools and equipment, and photos I had taken of the truck bed's contents over the years. I barely slept that night. My mind kept racing through possibilities and scenarios. What if the HOA claimed they had some legal right I did not know about? What if the police decided not to file charges? What if I was overreacting? But then I would remember standing in my empty driveway that morning, the violation of having someone take my property, my livelihood, from my own land without permission. No, I was not overreacting. They had crossed a line. Angela Martinez's office was in a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Phoenix skyline. Her receptionist was friendly and professional, offering me coffee while I waited in a lobby decorated with tasteful Southwest art. Angela herself was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, with an air of confidence that immediately put me at ease. She shook my hand firmly and led me into her office. Mr. Henderson, Marcus told me about your situation. I have been practicing HOA law for 15 years, and I have seen some outrageous behavior, but this ranks right up there. Walk me through everything. I spent the next hour going through my timeline, showing her all my documentation. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and occasionally shook her head in disbelief. "You have a copy of your covenants?" she asked. I pulled them out and handed them over. She flipped through them quickly, clearly familiar with how these documents were structured. Just as I thought. "There is nothing in here that gives them the right to tow your vehicle from your private property. The language about commercial vehicles specifically references street parking, not driveways. And even if you were in violation, their remedy would be to fine you and potentially place a lien on your property if you did not pay. They cannot just take your truck. So I have a case. You have an excellent case. Here is what I recommend. We file a civil lawsuit against the HOA for conversion, trespass to chattels, violation of your property rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We seek actual damages for the value of your time, lost work, and the stress you have endured. We also invoke Arizona Revised Statute Section 12691, which allows for treble damages in theft cases. Marcus mentioned that. How does it work exactly? The statute says that in any civil action for conversion or theft, if the defendant acted with malicious intent or reckless disregard for your rights, the court can award you 3 times your actual damages. Based on what you have told me, they ignored your letters, denied your appeals, and took your truck despite having no legal authority to do so. That is textbook reckless disregard. What about the criminal case? That is separate and actually helps us. The police investigation will generate additional evidence and documentation. If they file charges, which I think they will based on what you have told me, it strengthens your civil case significantly. Civil and criminal cases have different burdens of proof, but a criminal conviction would be very powerful evidence. How long does something like this take? Civil cases can take a year or more to resolve. However, I think once the HOA's lawyers see the strength of your case, they will want to settle. These community associations have liability insurance precisely for situations like this. The insurance company will evaluate the risk and likely push for settlement rather than go to trial and risk a huge judgment. What are your fees? I typically work on a contingency basis for cases like this. I take 33% of whatever we recover, and if we do not recover anything, you do not owe me anything. I will also advance the costs of litigation, which I recover from any settlement or judgment. You would not be out of pocket for anything. I thought about it for approximately 5 seconds. Let us do it. Angela smiled. Excellent. I will draft the complaint and file it within the next few days. In the meantime, do not communicate with the HOA except in writing and send me copies of everything. If they try to contact you, refer them to me. We shook hands, and I left her office feeling better than I had in months. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had some power in the situation. 3 days later, Angela called to tell me she had filed the lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court. The HOA, Patricia Morrison in her individual capacity, and the management company that handled the HOA's administrative tasks were all named as defendants. The complaint sought actual damages, treble damages under the theft statute, punitive damages, and attorney fees. They will be served within a few days, Angela said. Once that happens, things will start moving quickly. She was right. About a week after the lawsuit was filed, I received a phone call from a lawyer named Richard Preston, who identified himself as counsel for the HOA. His tone was condescending from the first word. Mr. Henderson, I represent the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association. I have reviewed your lawsuit, and frankly, I think you are wasting everyone's time and money. The HOA was within its rights to enforce its covenants. If you drop this lawsuit now, My clients are willing to forgive the accumulated fines you owe. I do not owe any fines because I was never in violation, and you can speak to my attorney, Angela Martinez. I am sure you have her contact information. Mr. Henderson, be reasonable. You are going to spend thousands on legal fees fighting this, and you are not going to win. I am not paying any legal fees. My attorney is working on contingency because she knows I am going to win. Goodbye, Mr. Preston. I hung up and immediately called Angela to tell her about the conversation. She was not surprised. That is a typical intimidation tactic. He is trying to scare you into backing down. The fact that he called you directly instead of going through me is actually an ethical violation. I am going to send him a letter making it clear that all communication goes through me. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation was progressing. Detective Sarah Willis from the Phoenix Police Department's Property Crimes Unit contacted me for an interview. She was thorough and professional, going through every detail of the dispute and the morning my truck was taken. "We have interviewed the towing company," she said. They confirmed that Patricia Morrison called them directly and authorized the tow. They have a recording of the call. She told them the vehicle was abandoned on HOA property, which was a lie since it was in your driveway. So she lied to get them to tow it. Yes. That is actually good for your case because it shows intent. She knew she did not have the right to tow your truck, so she lied about the circumstances to get the towing company to do it. What happens next? I am submitting my report to the county attorney's office with a recommendation for charges. Based on the evidence, I am recommending theft and fraud charges against Patricia Morrison. What about the other board members? That is trickier. They authorized the action, but Patricia was the one who actually made the call and lied to the towing company. The county attorney might decide to charge them as accessories, but I cannot guarantee that. I just want them held accountable. Detective Willis nodded. I understand. Give the county attorney about 2 weeks to review everything. They will make a charging decision then. True to her estimate, about 2 weeks later, I received a call from a prosecutor named David Chen. He explained that the Maricopa County Attorney's Office had decided to file criminal charges against Patricia Morrison for theft and fraud. The other board members were not being charged criminally, but they were named in a separate administrative complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which regulates HOAs. When will she be arrested? I asked. We will be issuing a summons for her to appear in court rather than doing an arrest. Given the nature of the charges and her lack of criminal history, she does not pose a flight risk. But make no mistake, these are serious charges. Theft of property worth more than $25,000 is a Class 3 felony in Arizona. What kind of sentence could she face, if convicted? Anywhere from probation to several years in prison, depending on the circumstances and her criminal history. But most first-time offenders in cases like this end up with probation, restitution, and community service. The news about the criminal charges spread through the Sunset Ridge community like wildfire. I started getting calls and messages from neighbors, some supportive, some angry that I was destroying the HOA. A few neighbors told me privately that they had their own horror stories about Patricia and the board but had been too intimidated to fight back. One neighbor, an older man named Frank who lived 3 doors down, stopped by one evening with a bottle of whiskey. "I wanted to thank you," he said as we sat on my back patio. "Patricia has been making my life hell for 2 years over my front yard landscaping. She does not like my rock garden and has been fining me constantly. I have been paying the fines because I did not know what else to do, but watching you fight back has inspired me. I am getting a lawyer too. You should talk to Angela Martinez, I said, giving him her information. She is amazing. Over the next few months, Angela worked on the civil case. The HOA's attorney, Richard Preston, filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, arguing that the HOA had immunity under Arizona law for actions taken in good faith enforcement of covenants. Angela opposed the motion with a detailed brief explaining that immunity does not apply when the HOA acts outside its authority or with malicious intent. The hearing on the motion was in August, about 5 months after my truck was towed. I attended with Angela, sitting in the gallery of Judge Catherine Reynolds' courtroom. Richard Preston argued his position, insisting that the HOA was just trying to enforce community standards. Your Honor, Mr. Henderson was in clear violation of the covenants by parking a commercial vehicle in his driveway. The HOA had every right to take enforcement action. Judge Reynolds, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes, looked skeptical. Mr. Preston, can you point me to the specific language in the covenants that prohibits parking a work truck in a private driveway? Preston fumbled through the covenants. Your Honor, the covenants give the HOA broad authority to maintain community standards and aesthetic values. That is not what I asked. Show me the specific prohibition. Well, Your Honor, the language is necessarily broad to allow the board flexibility in enforcement. Angela stood up. Your Honor, if I may. There is no specific prohibition because driveways are considered private property, not common areas. The covenants address street parking but are silent on driveways. The HOA cannot create rules that are not in the covenants just because they do not like something. Judge Reynolds nodded. That is my rating as well. Furthermore, even if Mr. Henderson were in violation, the HOA's remedy is to fine him and potentially place a lien on his property, not to unilaterally seize his vehicle. Mr. Preston, your motion to dismiss is denied. This case has sufficient merit to proceed. I could have hugged Angela right there in the courtroom. This was a major victory. As we walked out of the courthouse, Angela was practically glowing. That was huge. The judge essentially said your case is strong. Now Preston has to go back to his clients and tell them they are at serious risk of losing at trial. I expect to hear settlement overtures within a few weeks. She was right again. 3 weeks later, she called me with news. They want to settle. They are offering $20,000 to make this go away. That is way less than what we are asking for. I know, and I told them that. I countered at $150,000, which is the trebled value of your actual damages plus your lost time and emotional distress. They are going to come back with another number. This is just the opening dance. The negotiation continued for several weeks. Meanwhile, Patricia Morrison's criminal case was moving forward. She had been arraigned and pleaded not guilty. Her attorney was a criminal defense lawyer named Sandra Hoffman, who had a reputation for being tough but fair. I was subpoenaed to testify at a preliminary hearing in October. The courtroom was smaller than the civil court, and there was something more intense about a criminal proceeding. Patricia sat at the defense table looking considerably less confident than she had at those HOA meetings. She would not make eye contact with me. The prosecutor, David Chen, called me to the witness stand. He walked me through the entire timeline, from the first letters to discovering my truck missing. I kept my testimony factual and unemotional, just as he had coached me. Mr. Henderson, when you discovered your truck was missing, what did you do? I called the police immediately and reported it stolen. Did you give the HOA permission to tow your truck? Absolutely not. I did not even know they had done it until the police traced it to the tow yard. Sandra Hoffman cross-examined me, trying to suggest that I had been in willful violation of the covenants and that the HOA had exhausted other options. Angela had prepared me for this. "Mr. Henderson, you received multiple letters warning you to move your truck, correct?" I received letters asking me to move it, yes, but I was not in violation of any actual rule. "But you refused to move it despite these warnings." "I refused to let the HOA bully me into giving up my property rights. My truck was legally parked on my private property." The judge found probable cause to proceed to trial, which meant the criminal case would continue. Patricia's attorney would now have to seriously consider a plea deal. Meanwhile, back in the civil case, the settlement negotiations were heating up. The HOA's insurance company had gotten involved and was pushing hard for resolution. They did not want to risk a trial where a jury might award even more than we were asking for. In late November, Angela called me with the final offer. They will pay $125,000, all legal fees, and Patricia Morrison has to resign from the HOA board. They also have to send a letter to all homeowners clarifying that work vehicles are permitted in driveways. I thought about it. It was less than the full treble damages we had calculated, but it was substantial. More importantly, it achieved the goals of holding them accountable and changing the HOA's behavior. "What do you think?" I asked Angela. "I think it is a good settlement. We could go to trial and potentially get more, but there is always risk in trial. This is a guaranteed result, and it accomplishes everything you wanted. Plus, with the criminal case still pending against Patricia, you are getting justice on both fronts. Let us take it." The settlement was finalized in December. I received a check for $83,750 after Angela's contingency fee and the litigation costs she had advanced. The HOA also paid Angela's fees directly, which totaled another $42,000. Patricia Morrison resigned from the HOA board in disgrace. The letter went out to all homeowners explaining the new policy on work vehicles, and several other oppressive rules were quietly rescinded by the new board president, a reasonable man named Tom, who had opposed Patricia's authoritarianism all along. The criminal case resolved in January of the following year. Patricia accepted a plea deal, probation, community service, restitution to the HOA's insurance company for the settlement amount, and a permanent prohibition from serving on any HOA board in Arizona. She avoided jail time, but her reputation in the community was destroyed. On a cold January evening, almost exactly 10 months after my truck was stolen, I sat on my back patio with a beer, my work truck parked prominently in my driveway where it belonged. Frank, my neighbor, joined me with his own beer. "You know, you started something," he said. 5 other homeowners have filed lawsuits against the HOA for various abuses. The new board is actually working with them to resolve things without litigation. You changed this whole community." "I just wanted to park my truck in my driveway," I said, though I knew it was more than that. It was about standing up to bullies, about not letting petty tyrants abuse their power. My phone buzzed with a text from Angela. "Congrats again on the settlement. You were a great client. Enjoy your victory." I smiled and raised my beer toward my truck. That Ford F-250 had been through a lot with me. Countless job sites, long days, early mornings, and now, a legal battle that had exposed just how far some people will go with a little bit of power. But it was still there, still running strong, still parked exactly where it should be. The thing about HOAs is that they operate in this weird gray area of American law. They are private organizations with significant power over people's homes and daily lives. But they are also subject to legal constraints that many board members either do not understand or choose to ignore. Patricia Morrison thought she could just do whatever she wanted because she held a title and had a couple of supporters. She learned the hard way that property rights still mean something in this country. I thought about all the hours I had spent worrying about this situation, the stress of wondering if I would have to sell my house and move, the anger at being treated like a criminal for parking my work vehicle on my own property. It had all been worth it to reach this point. The settlement money was substantial, but it was not really about the money. Do not get me wrong, $83,000 was a life-changing amount for an independent electrician like me. I used some of it to buy a newer truck, ironically upgrading to a 2023 model. I put a chunk into savings. I paid off my mortgage. But the real victory was knowing that Patricia and the HOA had to admit they were wrong, had to pay for their illegal actions, and had to change their policies. Word spread beyond Sunset Ridge, too. Angela told me she had gotten calls from homeowners in other communities who were dealing with similar issues. My case was becoming something of a landmark in Arizona HOA law, a warning to other boards that they could not just make up rules and steal people's property. The Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs in the state, used my case as part of a training program for new board members about the limits of their authority. Angela was invited to speak at several legal conferences about HOA overreach and property rights. In a weird way, my stolen truck became a catalyst for broader change. As spring arrived in Phoenix and the temperatures started climbing back into the triple digits, life returned to a comfortable normal. I worked my electrical jobs, made good money with my business, and enjoyed my home without harassment. The new HOA board under Tom's leadership was reasonable and focused on actual community needs like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, not nitpicking about what vehicles people parked in their driveways. I ran into Patricia once, about 6 months after the settlement at a grocery store in Scottsdale. She saw me from across the produce section and immediately turned and walked the other way. I did not chase her or say anything. There was no need. She had already paid her price, both legally and socially. Brenda and Gerald, the other board members who had supported Patricia's tyranny, also resigned quietly. Brenda moved out of the community entirely, unable to face the neighbors who now knew about her role in the whole mess. Gerald stayed but kept to himself, rarely seen at community events or meetings. One unexpected positive outcome was that I got several new clients from the whole situation. Other electricians and tradespeople in the area heard about what I had done and started referring business my way. Homeowners who were dealing with their own HOA nightmares sought me out, wanting to support someone who had stood up to the system. My business actually grew substantially in the year following the settlement. I also became something of an unofficial advisor to other homeowners fighting their HOAs. I would get calls or emails from people asking for advice, wanting to know how I had navigated the legal system, what attorney I had used, what mistakes to avoid. I always directed them to Angela, and she appreciated the referrals. The criminal aspect of Patricia's case continued to follow her long after the plea deal. Having a theft conviction on her record, even with probation, affected her employment and social standing. She had worked as a real estate agent, and the Arizona Department of Real Estate suspended her license for 2 years. Without her income and facing the social stigma, she eventually moved out of state. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she relocated to somewhere in Texas, hoping for a fresh start. I never felt bad about the consequences she faced. She had made her choices, knowing full well that what she was doing was wrong. She had lied to the towing company, telling them my truck was abandoned on HOA property when she knew it was in my private driveway. That was not a mistake or an overzealous interpretation of rules. That was deliberate fraud. She earned every bit of punishment that came her way. The treble damages statute that made my settlement so substantial turned out to be a powerful tool that more homeowners started using against abusive HOAs. Angela told me about several cases she took on after mine where HOAs had seized or destroyed property, and in each case, the threat of triple damages pushed the associations to settle quickly. The insurance companies that cover HOAs started sending out bulletins warning boards about the risks of property seizure and the importance of following proper legal procedures. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized that standing up for yourself, even when it is difficult and stressful, can lead to changes bigger than just your individual situation. If I had given in to Patricia's demands and moved my truck, she would have continued to bully other homeowners. The HOA would have continued to overreach its authority. The whole community would have suffered under her petty tyranny. Instead, by fighting back, by documenting everything, by getting good legal representation, and by being willing to see it through to the end, I not only protected my own rights but helped protect others too. The new rules at Sunset Ridge were fairer. The new board was more reasonable. Other homeowners felt empowered to push back against unfair treatment. My lawyer friend Marcus, who had initially connected me with Angela, told me he was proud of what I had accomplished. You know what most people do when their HOA oversteps? They complain to their neighbors, post angry messages on social media, but then they just comply because fighting seems too hard. You actually fought and won. That takes courage. Maybe it did take courage, or maybe it was just stubbornness. I am not naturally a confrontational person. I like to get along with people, to avoid conflict when possible. But there are times when you have to stand up for what is right, even if it is uncomfortable. Your property rights matter. Your ability to make a living matters. Holding people accountable when they abuse power matters. The Sunset Ridge community actually became a better place to live after the whole situation resolved. The new board implemented more transparent procedures, published clearer guidelines, and created an appeals process for disputed violations. They held regular meetings where homeowners could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Tom, the new president, had a saying, "We are here to maintain the community, not to rule over it." That attitude made all the difference. I also learned a lot about the legal system through this process. I learned that property rights are still taken seriously by courts, that there are laws protecting people from theft and conversion, even when the perpetrator is an HOA, and that treble damages statutes exist precisely to punish and deter this kind of behavior. I learned that having good documentation is crucial, that certified letters create a paper trail, and that staying calm and factual is more effective than getting emotional. Most importantly, I learned that justice is possible if you are willing to fight for it. The system worked. The police investigated. The prosecutor filed charges. The civil court allowed my case to proceed. The judge rejected the HOA's attempts to dismiss it. The criminal court held Patricia accountable. And in the end, I got treble damages plus attorney fees, exactly what the law provided for. That Ford F-250 truck, with its blue Henderson Electric Services logo on the side, became something of a symbol in the neighborhood. Other tradespeople started parking their work vehicles in their driveways without fear. A plumber 2 streets over, a landscaper around the corner, a carpenter on the next block. We all went about our business, making our livings, contributing to our community without harassment. I think about that Tuesday morning sometimes, standing in my empty driveway in shock and rage, wondering how anyone could think it was acceptable to just take someone's vehicle. I think about the moment I decided to press charges instead of just accepting what had happened. That decision led to months of stress and legal proceedings, but it also led to justice, accountability, and change. If I could go back and do anything differently, I am not sure I would. Maybe I would have been more proactive about addressing the HOA's first letters, getting a lawyer involved earlier. But in the end, everything worked out. Patricia faced criminal charges and lost her position. The HOA paid triple damages and changed its policies. Other homeowners were protected from future abuse, and I got to keep parking my truck in my driveway, which was all I wanted in the first place. The experience also taught me about the power of community. Once people saw that it was possible to fight back against the HOA's overreach, others found their courage too. Frank with his rock garden. A woman named Susan who had been cited for having the wrong color curtains visible from the street. A young couple who had been fined for putting up a swing set for their kids without prior approval. All of them found the strength to push back, and in most cases, the new board backed down and rescinded the violations. Angela joked that I had become her best marketing tool. She did not need to advertise her HOA law practice anymore, because people just kept calling based on referrals from me and the other clients I had sent her way. She actually hired an associate attorney just to handle the increased caseload. In a strange way, Patricia Morrison's tyranny ended up creating business opportunities for lawyers willing to fight HOA abuse. The settlement money changed my life in practical ways too. Paying off my mortgage meant I had significantly more cash flow every month. I was able to upgrade my equipment, buy better tools, invest in my business. I hired an apprentice electrician, a kid named Danny who was eager to learn the trade. My business grew from just me, an occasional subcontract, work with Jake, to a real company with employees and multiple trucks. I even bought a second property, a small commercial space where I could store equipment and supplies, maintain my vehicles, and have an office separate from my home. No HOA to deal with at the commercial property, just a straightforward lease with a reasonable landlord. The business continued to expand, and within 2 years of the settlement, Henderson Electric Services had become one of the more successful electrical contracting companies in the Phoenix area. But I never forgot where I came from or what it took to get there. When other tradespeople called me asking for advice about their own HOA problems, I always made time to talk. When homeowners reached out looking for guidance, I shared my experience freely. And I always told them to document everything and get a good lawyer. The legal precedent set by my case ended up being cited in several other Arizona HOA disputes. Angela sent me copies of court decisions where judges referenced Henderson v. Sunset Ridge HOA as authority for limiting HOA powers. It was surreal seeing my name in legal opinions, knowing that my fight had contributed to the body of law protecting homeowners' rights. Patricia's departure from the state felt like the final chapter closing. With her gone, there was no lingering animosity, no awkward encounters, no remaining tension. The community could fully move on. Tom's board continued to operate reasonably and transparently. Home values in Sunset Ridge actually increased, which was ironic given that Patricia had claimed my work truck was hurting property values. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was good. My business was thriving. I had a home I loved without the stress of an oppressive HOA. I had financial security thanks to the settlement, and I had the satisfaction of knowing I had stood up for what was right and won, On the 1-year anniversary of the settlement, Angela called to check in. "How are things going, Isaac?" "Really good. Business is great, the neighborhood is peaceful, and I am parking my truck in my driveway without any problems." "Funny how that works," she laughed. "You know, your case changed things. I have seen a real shift in how HOAs approach enforcement, at least the ones that are paying attention. They are more careful now, more aware of the legal limits on their authority. You did that. We did that. I could not have won without you." "True, but you had the courage to fight in the first place. A lot of people would have just moved their truck and let Patricia win. You did not, and that made all the difference." After we hung up, I walked outside and stood in my driveway, looking at my trucks. The original 2019 F250 that had started this whole saga, and the newer 2023 model I had bought with the settlement money. Both had the Henderson Electric Services logo proudly displayed. Both were parked exactly where they belonged. The Arizona sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The desert air was cooling down from the day's heat. Somewhere down the street, kids were playing basketball. A neighbor waved as they walked their dog. It was peaceful and normal and exactly what I had wanted when I bought this house. I thought about everything that had happened. The letters, the fines, the theft of my truck, the police report, the lawsuits, the negotiations, the settlement, the criminal case, Patricia's resignation and departure. It had been a wild ride, but I would do it all again if I had to. Standing up for your rights is never the easy path, but it is the right path. My phone buzzed with a message from Danny, my apprentice. "Hey boss, I finished that job in temp. Everything looks good, see you tomorrow." I smiled and typed back, "Great work, see you at 8. This was my life now. Running a successful business, employing good people, serving my community, and yes, parking my work truck in my own driveway without anyone giving me grief about it. It was not glamorous or dramatic. It was just normal life, which is all I had ever wanted. But normal life had required fighting for it, standing up to bullies with power, enduring months of legal proceedings, and being willing to see it through to the end. The settlement check with all those zeros had been nice, but the real victory was the principle. You cannot just steal people's property, even if you are an HOA president. There are consequences for abuse of power. The law still means something. As darkness fell and the stars came out over the Arizona desert, I went back inside my house, my castle, my piece of property that I owned and controlled. Tomorrow I would wake up early, load my truck with tools and equipment, and head out to another job site. Life would continue in its normal rhythm, but with the satisfaction of knowing I had fought the good fight and won. And my truck would be right there in the driveway, waiting for me, exactly where it belonged.